Welcome to episode 6 of the Game Caddie tutorials. I'm Scott Moeller, and in this video we're going to look at how to take approach shots using the Approach Caddie. This video was originally released as episode 9 in the first set of tutorials that appeared here on the Game Caddie channel. You will hear references made to changes in the Approach Caddie that were new at the time. The version of the Game Caddie used in this video is 2.0, but the Approach Caddie in versions 3.0 and later look and work exactly the same as what's shown here. The Approach Caddie now works differently than the original version. What hasn't changed is the function of the Approach Caddie. So it is used for planning and executing shots that are from between 25 and 100 yards from the pin or the pin center line. It doesn't even come on your Caddie tab until you are within that range. And if you happen to be closer than that, let's say you're 20, 15, 5, or 10 yards away, you don't even need to use the Approach Caddie. You can go directly to the approach boards by clicking over here, and that will take you to the appropriate chart for executing your shot. But let's go back, because in this situation what we have is we have Jordan Spieth, who is 45 yards out to the pin with a good angle. The pin is located in this example at 450 right 5. We've gone ahead and placed his ball right on the center line, so he's at 405, putting him 45 yards from the pin, and actually 45 yards from the pin center line as well. Because he has a good angle, he is free to aim if he wants to change the location that he's targeting. So we see the current target, which is the default of 450 right 5. Anytime you have a good angle, the Approach Caddie is going to default to the pin location. But you're absolutely free to change that. You can change the distance value here, or you can change either of the lateral values if you wish to do so. Okay, so again, good angle and 45 yards out. This is a pretty basic example. We could go over here and we see that the call distance is calculated for us. We don't have to figure it out. The Approach Caddie will do that. Tells us we're 45. Come over here to the approaches chart. We'll click on this value. We get this chart. We go ahead and roll, and it gets a 31. And let's say that the ball's in the fairway, and the result of that shot is a 4. We'll click on the 4 here, and you'll see that the result is a 5. Click on transfer shot, and that brings us back here and shows that we overshot our target by 5 yards, and where the ball ended up is at 455 right 5. Not a bad shot, but not a perfect shot in this example. Okay, let's go ahead and reset the Approach Caddie so we can take a look at a different example. In this case, what we want to look at is the effect of wind and how that may change where you choose to set your target. So we'll come over here. I want to point out to you that I've gone ahead and put in a 10 for the carry, a steady tailwind effect. Come back here to Spieth's Caddie tab. Now, because he's at 45 yards out, that wind had no effect whatsoever. Wind doesn't affect approach shots that are 45 yards or less. Okay, but once you get above that number, what you're going to find is that for shots between 50 and 75 yards, the wind effects are going to be reduced by half, and then once you get above that, approach shot will have the full effect of the wind. So let's just put a different example in here that we can go ahead and look at. So I'm going to come up here to the place ball tool, and I'm going to put in, I'm going to hit 370, and we're going to put him still on the center line just to keep the example simple. We'll go ahead and place that and give him a fairway lie. And now what you notice is that the target is still a good angle because he's on the center line, and the target default is the same, 450 right 5, which is the pin location, but the call distance, which is calculated for you, is now 80 yards, and so that 10 yards of tailwind is going to come in to play on this shot. So even though this is where we have targeted, if we got a perfect shot, meaning if the result of our approach shot was a 0, you know, no variation in terms of the carry distance or right or left, the result of the shot would actually put us at 460 right 5. So it's adding that 10 yards of tailwind in there. So what we might want to do in this example is change this value to something like 440 right 5, and you'll notice what happens is that the called distance now changes to 70 yards, which gives us a somewhat easier shot, and it changes the ultimate ball location to 450 right 5, so that if we get a 0 now as our final result from the approach shot, we would end up on the pin thanks to a good shot and with some help from the wind. Okay, so let's go over and take a look at what happens when you're short-sighted, and we'll flip over here to Bubba Watson, and we've got him set up at 40 yards out from the pin, but we've put his ball location at 410 right 5, so his ball is actually on the same side of the center line as the pin location, so that means he is short-sighted. And you'll notice what happens here. He can't aim. These boxes are grayed out now because he's short-sighted. He's also too close to be able to work the ball if you wanted to in this situation. So these boxes are grayed out. So the default when you're short-sighted is the pin center line. So with the pin location being at 450 right 5, where he's targeted is at 450, no left and no right deviation. And again, because he's 45 yards or less from the pin, there's no effect from that wind of 10 yards that we set. So if he gets a perfect shot, he's going to end up putting the ball here at 450. One other thing to notice is that I put him in the sand trap for the purposes of this example, and just as a reminder, this box here tells you what your lie is, and if you have a bad lie, let's say he had a fried egg here, or he had a buried shot in the sand, we would also get a reminder of that in this location right here. Okay, now let's go ahead and change his position to take a look at another situation. So I'm going to put him at 355 right 15, and we'll place the ball, and we'll go ahead and we'll just put him in the rough here. Again, you'll notice that the lie changes to rough in this example. And what you have now is a situation where he's pretty far out. The approach caddy is still on because he's within 100 yards to the pin, but because he is short-sighted, the called distance for this target is at 100 yards. And the reason these two numbers aren't the same is because we've moved him 15 yards to the right, and he has to shoot to the center line, so that adds an additional 5 yards to the overall distance of the shot. You'll notice the effect of the wind here. So he's targeted at 450 0 0, and now has the opportunity to work the ball if he wants to do that. We could put values in these two boxes. But if he gets a perfect shot, he's actually going to go 10 yards too far here. And so, again, our option might be to play a different club here, or we could, meaning that we could reduce the target to 440, and that would do the same thing that we did when we showed you the example with Spieth. But we also might want to just take the wind out of play here, or at least reduce its effects. And one way to do that is to hit a knockdown shot. But we can't hit a knockdown shot with the approach caddy or with any of the approach boards over here. But what we could do is that we could turn the approach caddy off, and if we wanted to, hit a sand wedge and make it a knockdown shot, which would reduce the effect of that tailwind from 10 yards to 5 yards. And this, another situation in which you might want to do this is if you have a variable wind with an unpredictable second roll for your wind, it might make more sense, again, to hit the off button, turn off the approach caddy, and just go ahead and hit a regular iron shot, but make it a knockdown shot so it doesn't travel too far for you. If you change your mind after looking at all this and you want to get the approach caddy back on, one thing that you can do to make that happen is to hit the path button. And when you do that, the approach caddy comes back on, but it's also going to ask you, all right, do you want to make this shot approach from, in this case, the south, or do you want to come at it from the east? And if we decided that we wanted to come at it from the east, let's say to avoid particular terrain that might be more likely for us to end up in if we were coming in from the south, we could hit no here, and it will select east as our direction. And you'll notice what happens in the approach caddy is that the default in this instance was hitting from the south to the center line, but we have now selected a different path, which is to come in from the east. And this approach caddy, unlike the original one in Game Caddy 1.0, this one will apply the results of your shot from the golfer's perspective. So it doesn't matter where you are on the course. You could be past the green, shooting back in the direction of the tee, towards the hole, and if you end up with a result that is, let's say, a negative value for the carry, with this approach caddy, you'll actually come up short. Whereas in the original approach caddy, the math worked in such a way that a negative result always puts you south of your target, and that's been changed for the approach caddy. Now, if we would change our mind about whether we want to come in from the east, and we say no, let's just stick with the south, then you just hit the path button again and change your response that way. Now, you won't always have more than one option to change your path. It depends on where your ball is located, relative to your target location. But in many instances, you will, and most of the time, you may not even care about that. So you won't even fool with this button at all. But in those particular cases where you think your golfer has a particular tendency perhaps to miss long or miss left or whatever, and you want to play a shot taking that into account, this gives you the ability to do that. So those are the major features of the new approach caddy. And to summarize, just 3 things to keep in mind here. Okay, when you're planning your shot, okay, set your values across from the middle arrow here. You will always have the ability to change the white box underneath the target. Depending on whether you have a good angle or are short-sighted, you may or may not have the ability to change these values here. But remember that where your ball ends up is going to be reflected across from this bottom arrow. And the bottom arrow, when you're planning your shot, will take into account the effect of wind. So notice that these two values are not always the same. And once you've executed your shot, this is where your ball ended up, and it will always match what's shown up here in the new ball location tool. The final thing to remember is that the approach caddy does all the math for you. It will determine the distance of your called shot. You don't have to do that anymore, and then you can use that value in conjunction with the links over here to the approach boards in order to go ahead and execute that shot. Okay, that's how you hit approach shots. Until next time, grip it and rip it.